I just want to upload a video today talking about how I recently lost my job at this hospital I was working at. This was actually like my quote unquote second job. My main job was at the volunteer fire station that I had talked about in my previous video. But it's a small volunteer station, so they only pay once a month. So I had got this other job as my second job, quote unquote, but it ironically paid more. But I lost that job because I had to call in because I had a recent relapse back in October after being clean since July. And then prior to that, because that was July 2025, prior to that, I hadn't drank since July 2023. So I was sober for 2 years, and then I drank for like a weekend in July, which wasn't like a huge deal. Nothing happened. But, it was a relapse nonetheless. And then this October, I had drank over a weekend, but then it resulted in me calling in. And then after that, I they let me come back to work, but then I was working an overnight shift, and one of the coworkers snitched on me for falling asleep. They like put it in an email saying like so and so was asleep on the job. So then they go and look at the cameras, and then I obviously get in trouble, and then they put me on a suspension. And at the time, I didn't know if it was a paid suspension. I mentioned this in the last video. So like it had me like real anxious, and HR is obviously feeding me a bunch of corporate bullshit like, oh, can you well are can you walk us through this? Can you walk us through that? Like the entire time the decision's already made, but they're kind of just dangling me there. And the shitty part is that like I went through and applied for like probably 30 jobs, um probably even more than that, because like I remember on like one evening I just sat there for like probably 3 or 4 hours and just applied for job after job. And since I have my EMT, I'm mostly looking for like medical oriented jobs, like hospice care. Most of my experience is in emergency medicine because I worked on an ambulance for 3 years, so that's kind of where I'm going. I got an interview lined up for the emergency room at this local level 2 trauma center, which I'm super psyched about. I'm just waiting for my background check to clear, which, shouldn't be an issue. I have a clean background and everything. So right now, I've just been playing the waiting game, and it's a pain. I mean, anybody who's done this, I'm sure, you understand. But the shitty part that I don't understand is like, what did HR expect me to do? Did they expect me to just kind of wait around until they told me that I was fired? Because it literally took them over a month to tell me that. So then what? Like when I got my last paycheck, I was expected to just kind of like make it work. Like I still have bills that I had to pay and whatnot. Thankfully, my living situation is, really good. I say that just because like my father passed away in 2018, so I inherited his house. But I still have to maintain it. I still have to pay bills. I don't have to pay rent, thankfully, but I still have monthly expenses. I have two daughters that I have to pay child support for, and that all that stuff adds up, as any father knows. Thankfully, whenever they had put me on the first suspension, I'd went on like an application spree. Um, I say first, like there was more than one. That was the only suspension I was put on. But I went on an application spree, and I'm glad I did that a month ago, because like I had already went through the interview process and the background check stuff for the job that I was supposed to start this last Monday. But with the holidays, they said with the holidays, my background check, there was a delay on it. So now I'm having to just, like I said, play the waiting game. But I mean, it just really sucks because there was another guy that, that was on the job that got put on a suspension for like sexual harassment, and then they brought his ass back. So then I'm sitting here thinking like, okay, so let me get this straight. I fall asleep, you know, probably not for too long. I'm sure because like I'm there with a team of like two other nurses and then like another CNA. I'm technically an EMT, but like I can still do a CNA's job. Um, but or at least this job because we're like working in mental health. It's not like we're working in the ER. Um, at least I'm not working in the ER yet. I'm about to be, which is I'm super stoked about, like I said, because I get to take a phlebotomy class, which they're going to teach me how to draw blood, which is not an EMT skill that you learn in class. So pretty happy about that. But I've been working in mental health for like the past 6, 7 months or so, and like at the facility that I worked at, it's more than just. I mean, it's mental health as a whole, but it's like suicidal ideation, homicidal ideation, and then you also have people like going through withdrawals, and they could be withdrawing from anything. And like I obviously related with people who are withdrawing from alcohol the most, because that's what I personally went through. So like it was a it was a good job in that sense. Like it was a great job. Period. I'm not saying the job was bad, but I'm saying like for me, my background is like on the ambulance. I like working on the ambulance. I like doing my radio reports. I like taking blood pressures and like the kind of stuff you deal with. It's like very fast paced here at the mental health facility. It's pretty. It's at a lot slower pace. You're sitting down a lot. You're basically just you're babysitting people, really. I mean, if you want to boil it down, that's essentially, what you're doing. Not to undermine the job because, like, I've been there. I've been in a mental health facility when I was withdrawing from alcohol. And, anybody who's gone through that, if you go to like a detox center, a lot of these places are part mental health facility because, withdrawal, addiction, mental health, they all go hand in hand. But I've been wanting to get back in the emergency medical setting for a while now. And I mean, I didn't want to quit. I didn't have plans to quit, but like obviously, when major life changes like this happen, it forces you to change. And I think a lot of times in these situations, you kind of figure out that things really aren't as bad as you make them out to be in your head. Like I said, I've been wanting to get back into emergency. I almost said emergency medical system, but I want to get back into the emergency medical system. My goal this year is to get into paramedic school. I got my EMT in 2019, so I've been an EMT for about 6 years now. And everybody that was an EMT when I started, they're all paramedics now. And I'm sure a lot of people in my age group, I'm 30, they can relate to like people that they, in their early 20s that they knew, that have all advanced their careers at this point. And, you know, I don't look at it as like a thing to get depressed about. I look at it as a thing to like get motivated about. Like these are my friends, and I'm really happy to see that they get through the paramedic course. It's a hard course to get through. It's almost like to an extent, it's almost like RN school. I haven't been to nursing school, so I don't want to say that, and disrespect any nurses out there. But, paramedic school is hard. A lot of people can attest to that. And, that's one of my goals this year is to, get enrolled with that. And, now that I have a job lined up in the emergency room, hopefully, that can set me on track to try and achieve that goal. It's super important to have goals. I feel like that's like probably one of the core things I've learned since getting sober is that, being able to have goals. Because when I was drinking every single day, it was almost like impossible to have a goal. I mean, how can you have a goal when you've got like an addiction on your back, like basically forcing you to do a certain thing that you don't even necessarily want to do? It gets to that point. But that's about it. I just wanted to talk about, how I recently lost my job about a month ago and about how I, hopefully am going to start this new job soon. And, about how when you have like a major life change, like losing a job or losing a girlfriend or something like that, it's not always the end of the world. Doors closed, new ones open. Um, I just am obviously trying to stay on the correct path and do the right thing. I started my YouTube journey about 8 months ago, and I've been learning how to edit, and just I bought a mic and just how to navigate this whole landscape, and it's been really fun and pretty rewarding, so far. But anyway, hope everybody has a good time, good night, good weekend, good week. I appreciate each and every view that I ever get, and hope everybody has a good time. Later.